right, good morning. Welcome to those of you that are here in Phoenix. For those of you that are new, we are super glad you're joining us today. For those of you that are watching us online, apps, Roku, or YouTube, we are glad you're joining us too. If you want to know more about our ministry, go online to womensbiblestudy.com. I'll tell you my little story this week because apparently the Super Bowl's coming up. Okay, and I haven't paid any attention to football at all. So I went to Dusty's church. Rob and I went to Dusty's church on Sunday, and the pastor said a really funny joke. I'm going to tell it to you. So if you don't like it, blame it on him. Thank you. All right. So I didn't realize, this is what made me realize the Super Bowl is coming up. So there was a guy that someone blessed him with a ticket to the Super Bowl, and it was like front row, 50-yard line. He was so excited. So probably every pastor told this same joke in church, right? Did he? Everyone knows this? No, okay. I'd never heard it before. It was so cute. So he gets there, and the seat next to him is empty, and he doesn't really know why, and he thinks, well, we're at the 50-yard line. I'm sure someone will show up. But by halftime, no one shows up. And so he finally looks at the guy sitting, 2 seats down, and he says, why, whose seat is that? And he goes, oh, that's mine. And he goes, well, what's the problem? Why is no one sitting there? And he said, my wife and I have gone to every Super Bowl since we got married, everyone, but she just passed away. And he goes, oh, I'm so sorry, but couldn't you just get someone to fill that seat, like your father, son, neighbor, whatever? And he said, no, they're all at the funeral. I know. That was kind of funny, okay? I mean, it's kind of tacky, but kind of funny. So when I realized it. Now, most of you know that I pick my teams how? Color, thank you. I don't even care what, that's why I say our friends that are here are from the Seattle area, so they're Seattle Seahawks fans. They're my favorite team, only because, I don't know who's on the team, but they have the coolest uniforms in the entire world. So that's how I pick teams. So I went to lunch with my dad afterwards, after church, and we sat down, and he said, oh yeah, we're going to go watch football. And I said, oh, who's playing, the Cardinals? So if you came to see the Cardinals, they're not playing. I understand that now. I haven't paid attention at all to the Cardinals. So anyway, I had to find a new team to root for. So now I am a Rams fan. Why? Coolest helmets ever. Nope, coolest helmets. I don't care about anything else. I don't even know who plays. And then I know you guys are from. You guys are back there with the. Who's the second team that played? No. The Patriots. You're not a Patriot fan. Okay. All right. Well, good. Then you're going to be happy that I'm a Rams fan, only because they have the cutest helmets. Okay. Oh. Do you want to talk about Bible or you want to talk football? Bible. Okay. Yeah, that is why we're there. Okay. Let's start here. Here you go. This is what we're going to talk about. Never quit until God makes it clear it's time. So I think for the Saints in Kansas City, I think God made it clear it's time for them, huh? So, honestly, Kansas City, though, that young little quarterback, he's like 23 years old. He's younger than my daughter. And I'm like, I was rooting for him just because of that, but I know nothing else about him. All right. Peter Logman, he is a pastor. He talks about when he ran track in high school. And he said that he ran all the 100-yard, 200-yard, whatever those things were, but he always ran the relay. He said that when he was a junior in high school, they hired a brand new coach. And the coach would always sit down and talk to the team about strategy and all of these kind of things. And he said, the kids in a junior high school, they're totally bored by the whole thing. But he said as the season progressed, they realized how valuable what this coach had to say was for their track running team. So what he told us in this article was that they always sent out a scout before the next team that they were running against. And the scout would go and find out, which is the best lane to be in, which shoe should you wear, all those kind of things. And he said the best tactic that his coach ever did was teaching this team a word, one word. And if you were on the relay team, he wanted you to yell this word. Now, I guess this is how relay teams work. You pass the baton, and as you're running up to the next person, you yell Frank, John, West High, whatever it is, and then they know that, you're ready to go. So he said they actually made it to the semifinals or something, but all the teams they were playing against or running against were really, really difficult. So they practiced this one specific word. And when the finals came, they started out, and this guy, this Peter Logman, was the last person on the relay team, so he'd be the last one that would get the baton. So he said they shot the gun off, and everyone, 1, 2, 3, and he said, I look back, and we're completely behind. And he said, I know we're going to lose this race. There's no way to catch up. He said, so when the guy came up to give the baton to him, he yelled the one word that he was taught to yell, and it was this: stop! Okay. And he said, I took the baton, ran as fast as I could, and I finished seconds later in first place. All right. Here's the thing, is that who told any of those other people to stop? And it wasn't his coach. It was the opposing team. And I think there's a lesson in there for us that says this: sometimes we stop. Sometimes we stop this race of following Jesus because we hear someone tell us we need to stop. And a lot of it's probably backed by the devil, I would assume. But sometimes we stop because we hear voices saying things like, life's just too tough. Jesus hasn't come through for you. You need to just stop. And some of us listen to that voice that isn't God's voice at all. Some of us stop sharing our faith because we hear a little voice that says, no one's listening. They just think you're stupid. And then we stop. And it's not the voice of God. It's a random opposing team's voice. Some people stop their ministry because you look around and this little voice says, they only come for the apple fritters, okay? There was only one apple fritter over there. We had a big apple fritter problem this morning. But you have these voices like people just show up for the donuts or the bagels, and they don't even want to be here to listen to the word of God. And then you think, well, maybe I should just quit. And they're just opposing voices that just keep coming at you. Sometimes people quit because you just hear voices that say everything you're doing for God is just a waste of time. And so many people just quit and walk away. But what we're going to see today in Acts is that Peter and Paul never stop. Even when God did things that they didn't expect. So many of you are at places in your life right now where God is doing things in your life and you're like, why is God doing that to me? Why am I sick? Why do I have cancer? Why is my husband leaving me? Why? And we're very, very frustrated because God is allowing things in our life that we never expected. And the opposing team would love for us just to quit our relationship with God because of it. Think about this for Paul and Peter and all the early disciples. God was doing things that they never expected, like, oh, by the way, we're inviting the Gentiles in. They're like, what? We don't like the Gentiles. Why would you invite them into the family of God? But they kept going even though that wasn't what they expected. When James, their beloved James, was murdered by a sword, that was not what they expected for this early church. And the opposing team would be like, really, you're next. You shouldn't do that. You don't want to do that. God's not going to protect you. You see what I'm saying? We hear these opposing voices all the time. And sometimes when things just didn't seem like anything was working, here's one thing they did. They never quit. They wanted to, I bet sometimes, but they never, ever did. Here's some guys all through history that never quit, even though they had every reason to. George Washington, I don't know if you knew this, lost 2/3 of the battles that he fought in the American Revolution. He won the war, but he lost most of the battles. Napoleon graduated 42nd out of a class of 43, and he went on to conquer Europe. Abraham Lincoln lost almost every election he ran, like 10 to 12, until he finally became elected president. Thomas Edison tried over 200 elements before he figured out the right one for a light bulb. 200 failures, 200 people's voices saying, it's never going to work, it's never going to work. And yet he never stopped. Babe Ruth, in 21 years, hit 714 home runs, but he struck out 1,330 times. No one ever tells us about the strikeouts. They only tell us about the home runs. He said this: never let the fear of striking out keep you from taking a swing. John Creasy, a famous novelist, got 753 rejection slips for a book that he was writing before he went on to get published and write 564 more. R.P. Macy failed 7 times as an entrepreneur in retailing before he started Macy's department store. Here's what you and I need to know. It's always too soon to quit. Please remember that. It's too soon to set. And this is what I want to say. Unless you feel that what you're about to quit from is truly, honestly, Holy Spirit driven, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it when emotions are running high and I hate my boss and I'm going to quit, or I hate my husband and I'm going to walk out, or I hate this and I'm just going to quit because nothing's going good. Don't do it on those days. We always say this, never quit on a bad day. Never, ever quit on a bad day. Do not walk out when you're frustrated. Don't walk out of your marriage in the middle of a fight and never come home. Don't stop being friends with that person because you got a little tiff. Don't do that. Don't quit when people are mad at you. Don't quit when things aren't going the way you think that they should go. Just don't quit. You need to make sure when it's time for you to quit that it really is from God. And can I just say, this is going to sound really weird, but sometimes that means when the small group is packed to the brim. Sometimes that means when your book is selling. And your book is selling and you're like, I should write another one, but you just feel this, God doesn't want me to write anymore. He wants me to speak. I mean, you see what I'm saying? It's when things are going good, a lot of times, is when you really honestly know that God is moving you to a different place. A lot of times it's when people are happy with you. I always say, this Bible study is going to get shut down someday, and when it does, it's going to be on a good day. It's not going to be when people are whining because they don't like what I wear, or people don't like the skirt that I wear, okay, or people don't like my political jokes that I tell, and then I hear about it, and people leave. That's not what's happening, so we're not going to quit on those days. If this Bible study shuts down, it's going to be on a good day when I just know God is saying, you know what, Lisa, I think we're done. I'll be okay, that's fine, whatever that looks like. Here's what I would say. That doesn't mean you get to quit. Because what you need to know is you get to move to a new place. And all of us, we're moving, God's moving us to different places all the time, to the new job, to the new marriage, to the new whatever happens in your life. But your mission is always to share Jesus, no matter what that looks like in your life. So let's pick up our story in Acts. We're going to deal with someone who actually quit on the Apostle Paul, and he was very, very angry about it. And then we're going to finish out our lesson talking about this. Life is really hard. And some of you know that. You're living through a really, really hard, difficult time today. We're going to see the ups and downs of Paul, and we're going to see what happens in his life and how he deals with it. Let's start here, Acts 13. Now, when Paul and his party set sail from Paphos, they came to Perga in Pamphylia, and John, departing from them, returned to Jerusalem. Now, most people would just read that and just move on to verse 14. But what you miss is one of the Apostle Paul's greatest perceived failures in life. And that is those last 6 or 7 words right there. And John, departing from them, returned to Jerusalem. John Mark went with Paul, and he went out to get the gospel out into the world. But something happened. And honestly, we have no idea what it was. And it makes me think it wasn't something like he got sick or, someone died in his family, because the Apostle Paul is so angry that John Mark left. And it actually made this split in the church because of those words right there when John Mark left. But like I said, we don't know why. Maybe he got homesick. He probably was annoyed with the Apostle Paul, because I have a feeling he's probably was not that easy to hang out with. But whatever reason, John Mark left. And this is what I say. He stopped the race for whatever reason. And like we said, the Bible is silent on that. We don't know, but we do know Paul was unhappy, so it probably wasn't something that he should have not done. Here's Acts 15. This is the place where you can see this. Then after some days, Paul said to Barnabas, "Let us now go back and visit our brethren in every city where we've preached the word of the Lord and see how they're doing." Barnabas was determined to take with them John, called Mark. So this is later on, a couple chapters forward. And they're getting ready to leave. And Barnabas, of course, he wants to just embrace everyone. He's like, "Hey, John Mark, come back, come with us." But Paul insisted that they should not take with them the one who had departed from them in Pamphylia and had not gone with them to the work. Then the contention became so sharp that they parted from one another. So Barnabas took Mark and sailed to Cyprus. Paul chose Silas and departed, being commended by the brethren to the grace of God. Isn't that amazing? This church literally just almost split in two with these two guys all over, should I have John Mark come? Because he walked away from the mission. And the Apostle Paul was not very compassionate for people who did that. So here's what I want to talk to you about today, is that this is good news for those of you. For those of you that have done something in your life, or you've maybe walked away from your faith, or maybe you've walked away from your ministry or your calling, or maybe you got in trouble, you had the affair, you became an alcoholic, you started drinking too much, like whatever that is. Today I want to show you this. You can always be restored. And we're going to learn that today. There was a large 2-engine train that was crossing Canada. After it had gone some distance, one of the engines broke down, and the engineer said, you know what, we'll just run the train on one engine. But farther down the line, the other engine broke down. And the train came to a standstill. And so the engineer said, well, I need to tell the passengers. So he gets online, and he gets on the microphone, and he says, ladies and gentlemen, I have some good news and some bad news. He said, the bad news is that we're on a 2-engine train, and both engines have gone down. So we're going to be here for a while until someone fixes it. The good news is that you decided to take a 2-engine train and not fly a 2-engine plane. Yeah. Okay, here's the bottom line. Good news is that there is hope even in failure, and that's what I want us to walk away with today, knowing that. Because we see it with John Mark and the Apostle Paul. When Paul was in prison at the end of his life, and this was the last letter that he wrote to Timothy in 2 Timothy, and he's about ready to be beheaded for his faith. And look what Paul writes in 2 Timothy. He said, be diligent to come to me, for Demas has forsaken me, having loved this present world, has departed for Thessalonica, Cretans for Galatia, Titus for Dalmatia. Only Luke is with me. But look what he says, get Mark. Get Mark and bring him with you, for he's useful to me for ministry. And you're like, what? What just happened? I thought Paul hated Mark. But I think as the more time and the more we grow in our faith, we realize this. Failure is really not forever. It really isn't. And whatever it was that upset Paul so much that split them apart from Barnabas, he eventually came to the point of realizing that we as Christians need to give grace and mercy to people who have failed, knowing that failure honestly is not forever. And really for John Mark, maybe whatever he did was for a season. Maybe he eventually got it together. We knew he did because he went on to write the book of Mark in the Bible. So when you say Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, this is the same Mark that this whole issue was the Apostle Paul had with him. And I just want to say that for some of you, today may be the first day that you're coming back to Bible study. You're like, oh my gosh, I need to get my life back together again. I'm going to show up at Bible study. Maybe some of you this morning picked up your Bible for the very first time in 10 years. And maybe for you, just like John Mark, there was that moment that said, I cannot live without Jesus and following him. And everything changed from that moment on. And the good news is that with John Mark, God gave him a fruitful ministry. When you write one of the Gospels, that's kind of a big deal. And God is not done with you yet. I don't care what you've done in your past. I don't care what has happened in your life. God is absolutely not done with you if you are a child of God. He wants to go seek you and find you and bring you back into his family so he can use you. Don't ever think that your failure is forever. There was a Boy Scout, and he was really excited to go on an annual winter camp. And when they pulled up to they got the bus, and then they hiked in a couple miles. And there was snow on the ground, a couple feet. And when he got putting the camp up, he realized he forgot something. So he decided he was going to run back to the bus, which is about 2 miles. But as he was going back, the snow started coming harder. And he realized that what he was supposed to learn in Boy Scouts, he really didn't learn because he didn't mark things, he didn't pay attention where he was going, and he got lost on his way back. And the scoutmaster, as they were taking roll call, apparently realized there was one child missing. And that scoutmaster went out and combed the entire area until he found the one lost boy. And that's what I want you to know, that is exactly what Jesus does for those of us that get lost along the way. He goes, he seeks you, he finds you, he brings you back. And he says, I want to use you right where I'm at. We have a sweet girl that comes here, and we actually met her, and she's homeless. And I asked her if I could say this about her today, and she's so sweet, and she's been coming to Bible study. But I told her last week, she said she was with a group of girls, and she was talking about one of our books that we wrote, and she was reading the Bible passages to them, and she was all excited. And I told her, I said, what's so cool about you is that you can reach people that would never show up here. You can reach a whole group of segment of homeless people because you talk their language, you get it. And I said, I'm so incredibly proud of you for letting God use you exactly where you're at. God wants to use you exactly where you're at. I don't even know what that means. For some of you, that means when you're getting chemo every couple weeks. You're sitting next to people and people need to hear about Jesus and they see your attitude. I don't know what it is in your life, but God wants to use you. He seeks you. He brings you back and says, please let me use you. I don't care about your past. I really honestly don't. We're going to read a kind of a long story. We're going to read it together because it's so powerful to me. David Hull wrote this, and we're going to, it's in your thing that I'll put up on the screen here. This is how it starts. One of the most beloved paintings in Rembrandt's, The Return of the Prodigal Son. Oh, wait, I guess I'm supposed to be doing this. There it is. I keep forgetting I'm in control up here. This is the painting. For those of you who can see it, it's this painting right here. It's kind of an interesting, this is a copy of what it looks like. That painting is actually in the museum, in Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg. So let's do this. Imagine for a moment that some men decided to break into the museum during a night of drunken revelry in order to deface various pieces of boring art in their estimation. Completely oblivious to the value of Rembrandt's painting, they rip it off the wall, they slash the painting diagonally from the frame corner to corner, pour cheap beer over it, and stomp on the painting itself, leaving muddy boot prints into the canvas. All right, so I even brought this. Look at this. This is me. So this is what they do. And the reason why I'm doing this is because some of you feel like you used to be this great masterpiece from God, but then something happened in your life. And whether it was because of what you did or someone else did, like this is your life now. That beautiful painting, and it's like, That looks like I'm mad. Whoops, sorry. And then they did that. And then they poured beer all over it. Okay. And then they stomped on it. Okay. Some of you feel like that's your life. Like some of you feel like that. You're just a mess because something bad. I'm afraid my pants are going to split. That's always the problem up here. Well, stay. Okay. I was going to pick that up, but then I decided that might be a problem too. Or I could just go on a diet, but that's not happening. Okay. So anyway, I just want you to think, like for some of you, you just can't get over your past. You're just like, that's me. I'm just a disaster area because I just messed up my life, or someone's messed it up for me, or maybe I was abused as a child, or maybe something bad happened, and that's how I feel. But you once were not like that. You were this perfect painting that God painted. You're his masterpiece. Okay, so you feel that way for right now. When the curators discover this, they are distraught because here you go. In their eyes, what was once priceless has been reduced to nothing more than trash. A dishonor to the masterpiece that communicated deep truths about the world and its artists to many. Deemed to no longer be worthy to be on display, the tarnished and vandalized painting was put on auction. People from all over to bid on this one masterpiece for either bragging rights or sentimental value. Imagine for a moment that Rembrandt were still living. Seeing and hearing about what had happened to his masterpiece, he was furious and aghast at the complete disregard for what is esteemed to have been the pinnacle of his life's work. He sent representatives to the auction to reclaim the painting, and when he arrived, he encountered men and women who could only see the painting in its present form. Can I just stop there? Some people honestly just think that the way you are today is the way you're always going to be. And that's just not true. You've got to let God come in and restore you the way he wants to. Stop feeling like that no one, buying into this lie. He said, and the men and women could only see the painting in its present form, bedraggled and disheveled, limply hanging from a frame that it once proudly filled out. As such, they were bidding a pittance on the work, outdoing one another by a few dollars here and there, and a few dollars there. See, some of you think you have such low self-esteem and self-worth, and you think that nobody loves you or nobody wants you, and that's not true. You are this masterful painting that God has made. I don't ever want you to forget that. Rembrandt's representatives, however, had clear instructions from the artist, and the room grew silent as he boldly bid the full value of the painting from before it had been vandalized, an astronomical sum. The silence was broken by the auctioneer's gavel, and Rembrandt's representatives walked out of the room with the painting and returned it to the artist. As Rembrandt gazed at his once masterpiece, his heart was full of fury and sorrow. His life's work reduced to trash by the callous and dispassionate actions of those who could not see its value. Some of you feel that way right there because people have trampled on you, they've hurt you, they've destroyed you, and it makes God angry. I want you to know that, like it breaks his heart because his heart is, you're mine. I created you. You're my child. I don't like it what people have done to you or what you've done to yourself. It breaks his heart. I want you to think that. So many people think, God hates me. He's mad at me. Stop it. He doesn't feel that way. He wants you back, and he wants to restore you. And yet, although he was not blind to the slashed canvas, know that. He knows what you've done in your life. Ground in mud, the odor of stale beer in his mind's eye, he could still see the painting in its original glory. And so he began to painstakingly restore the painting, weaving together the painting along the slash line with almost imperceptible thread, although a faint crease like a scar now traversed what had once been immaculate. He painstakingly cleansed the mud from the canvas, and where the paint had been distorted by split beer, he matched the hues from memory and touched it up. After many long hours of laborious work, he stood back, sweat pouring from his brow, and simply smiled. His representative came in and stood shoulder to shoulder with him, admired the restored masterpiece, and declared, although I believed in the vision you shared with me and was willing to pay the full price to restore this painting to you, I can see now the painting restored is even more beautiful now than when you first painted it. The crease through the painting only seems to bring out the motive of restoration and reconciliation from scarcity and separation even more. I love that. See, here's what you and I need to understand, is that whatever you've been through in your life, whatever's happened, you have scars. And I want you to know that's okay. Because God uses people with scars. Because if you have scars, that means that when God restores you and paints you back up the way you're supposed to be, then you can go out and talk to someone else who feels like that. And that's just what he does. He uses you with all your scars to go back and help someone else. That's a magnificent thing about what Jesus does for us. Putting his hand on Rembrandt's shoulder, he said, "You are the greatest artist I have ever known. All well-known artists have left masterpieces for the world to appreciate, but you are the only one I have ever seen." Here you go. "Restore a masterpiece defaced and destroyed to more sublime beauty than its original form." That's what he wants to do with you. My friends, this is a story of the gospel. This is a story about you and me. Like the painting, our lives have been defaced and vandalized by the callous and indifferent actions of people, whether others or ourselves, that betray a complete lack of understanding of our intrinsic value. As it is with the way with people in general, all that most others, and even we can see, are the slashes, stains, and disfigurement that mar and obscure what was always intended to be a masterpiece. However, those who are closest to us catch glimpses of what the artist always intended and comment on the subtlety of brushstroke here, the masterful blending of colors there. Unfortunately, we often do not have ears to hear that elevate words of affirmation and suggest anything remotely resembling beauty or quality within us, so we auction ourselves off to the highest bidder. Can I tell you, stop listening to those voices. You have people in your life that say you're just worthless, you'll be nothing, God can't use you, you were so bad, blah. It's that voice like, stop. We have to stop listening to those voices and start listening to the voice of what God wants us to hear. We are desperate to be affirmed and assessed as valuable, even if the price that others offer are insulting pittance in light of what we were always intended to be. Thankfully, God sent his representative, Jesus, who walked into the world's auction house and observed God's defaced and tarnished masterpiece being auctioned off for pennies. Informed by a vision of what the painting was intended to be, and guided by the desire of the artist, he boldly paid the full price for the original painting, silencing every other competing voice. Humanity was the pinnacle of God's life work. Thus, Jesus laid down his life in order to restore us to God. When God looks at us, he is not unaware of the slashes, disfigurement, stains, and odors. And his heart is full of both fury and sorrow at what has befallen his masterpiece. And yet this is not all he sees. In his mind's eye, he sees its original form and begins the work of painstakingly restoring it to its original glory. Those slashes that we thought would leave us hanging limp for the rest of our lives are mended with almost imperceptible thread. Although there will always be a scar, he cleanses the stains and disfigurement with tender gentleness, replacing mottled hues with those in his original design. Rather than diminishing the beauty of the masterpiece, these touch-ups and mending work communicate the original message proclaimed by the painting with greater force and beauty. Although any master artist, whether Rembrandt, Van Gogh, Monet, or Da Vinci, can leave us with a masterpiece to delight in, it's only the master artist who can take a masterpiece once defaced and destroyed and restore it to more sublime beauty than its original form. This is the gospel. This is good news. Don't buy into a lie that all the ways your life is marred by pain or suffering, whether by your own hands or those of others, have left you as nothing more than a cheap piece of trash. There is a master artist who sees both what has befallen you, but also sees what you were always intended to be. Allow him to restore your life so that all might once again marvel at what his hands have made. Don't be discouraged and disheartened. This is what I want to say with full force. Don't be disheartened or discouraged if it seems like the restoration is taking time. The degree to which the painting was vandalized will be reflected in the time the artist painstakingly takes to restore it. Each slash, distorted color, and disfigurements is one that the artist feels intimately, and nothing less than perfect restoration will do. If you are aware that he has begun his work, you can rest in the confidence that he will complete it with tenderness, single-minded focus, and attention to detail. Isn't that awesome? It's just that whole reminder that what happens is that God takes this slashed piece of work and then he turns it back into this. Something that's just perfect. Something that he's taken and he's redone it. And he's saying, now I've got you back. And yeah, there's some scars that I can see, but it doesn't really matter. I want to use you just like he did with this. That I wanted to talk about because of John Mark. Because for whatever reason, John Mark walked away and maybe went down there and got trampled on and slashed and all of these things. But here's the one thing we know about John Mark is that he never let his failure define him. Do not let your failure define you. We can't do that. He let God restore him and then use him. Let God restore you and use you. And to me, this is the greatest lesson of how God loves us and creates us. And he wants to restore us back to our original, the original way he made us so that we can be used by him. It's a great lesson for all of us who have walked away from God for a season. All right, we'll move on to the next part. So Paul continues with his trip. I want to talk really quickly about the ups and downs of life and what we do, what happens when our lives are up and down, which they always are. Here you go. Here's verse 14. We're back in Acts. But when they departed from Perga, they came to Antioch in Pisidia and went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day and sat down. Now, remember, Paul is out trying to tell people about Jesus, but Paul was a Jewish man, so the place that he knew the best was the synagogues. But he knew when he walked into a synagogue, people aren't going to be very happy he's there because he's going to tell them something that they need to know about Jesus, and they don't want to know about Jesus. And so this is always a contention point with the Apostle Paul. Whoops, sorry. Let's see if I can do this right. There we go. And after the reading of the law and the prophets, the rulers of the synagogue stood up saying, "Men and brethren, if you have any word of exhortation for the people, say on." Now, how do you think the Apostle Paul felt about that? It's like, hey, does anyone have anything to say? Paul's like, I do. And everyone's just cringing like, oh no, it's Paul. Here we go. Have another bagel and donut because he's going to talk a long time. Paul always took opportunities to tell people about Jesus. Verse 16, then Paul stood up and motioning with his hand, "Men of Israel, and you who fear God, listen." Now, in this particular audience, there was Jews and Gentiles, but Paul's focus at this point was the Jews. And we're going to read a kind of lengthy section here, but here's why. Because Paul, like he always does, gives history lessons. Because he's saying, look, I need you guys to know historically why I'm telling you about Jesus. Because it's through your lineage, it's through your past, your ancestors, your Abraham. That's the whole reason why Jesus came on this earth. I need you to see big picture. And so Paul says, I'm going to show you from your own scriptures. He doesn't bring in the New Testament. He doesn't bring in anything because it wasn't written yet. But it's like none of that happened. He said, I am going to show you from your scriptures. I'm going to prove to you that Jesus is who he said he was. So he says this, the God of this people, Israel, chose our fathers and exalted the people, whether they dwelt as strangers in the land of Egypt, and with an uplifted army brought them out. He tells them, first off, hey guys, remember when your ancestors were stuck in Egypt, and then God brings Moses along and go and gets them out? Okay, this is, and they know all these stories, so everything Paul is saying will make total sense. He says, now for a time of about 40 years, he put up with their ways in the wilderness. In other words, your ancestors were kind of brats, is kind of what he was trying to say there. And when he had destroyed 7 nations in the land of Canaan, he distributed their land to them by allotment. In other words, he's saying, hey, and by the way, you know this land that you're sitting on right here? It's all because God did what he did with Moses, brought you into the land. Your piece of land is right here, all because of this. So he's trying to get them to connect the dots. He said, verse 20, after that, he gave them judges for about 450 years until Samuel the prophet. And then afterwards, they asked for a king. So this is all the Jewish people will know this. And afterwards, they asked for a king. So God gave them Saul, the son of Kish, a man of the tribe of Benjamin, for 40 years. And then when he'd removed him, he raised up for them David. So everyone knows King David. You know, they understand who this is. David is king, to whom he also gave testimony and said, I have found David, the son of Jesse, a man after my own heart, who will do all my will. Okay, if you're Jewish, you love King David. From this man's seed, according to the promise, God raised up for Israel a Savior, Jesus. Now, this is where you lose the Jewish people. They're like, I like what you said up to this point, but this kind of makes me mad. Because they don't want to believe that. They stumbled over this. And it's so frustrating because Paul's pointing out the whole scene to them. He said, after John the Baptist, had first preached before his coming, the baptism of repentance to all the people of Israel. And as John was finishing his course, he said, who do you think I am? I'm not he, but behold, there comes one after me, the sandals of whose feet I'm not worthy to loose. John the Baptist is like, I'm not the Messiah. He's coming. Just hang on. He'll be here in a few. Men and brethren, sons of the family of Abraham. He's always bringing it back to Abraham because that's what Jewish people liked. And those among you who fear God, to you the word of this salvation has been sent. For those who dwell in Jerusalem and their rulers, because they did not know him, nor even the voices of the prophets which are read every Sabbath, have fulfilled them in condemning them. And though they found no cause for death in him, they asked Pilate that he should be put to death. Now when they had fulfilled all that was written concerning him, they took him down from a tree and laid him in a tomb. In other words, you guys killed him. Really? Like this was God's promise to you, and you murdered him and stuck him on a cross. But look at what God did. But God raised him from the dead. He was seen for many days by those who came up with him. We saw him. You know, Luke, John, and Matthew, they all hung out with him. I mean, Paul, of course, had his own time that he saw him. But he was seen for many days by those who came up with him from Galilee's Jerusalem, who are his witnesses to the people. And we declare to you tidings that promise which was made to the fathers. God has fulfilled this for us, their children, and that he has raised up Jesus, as it is also written in the 2nd Psalm, you are my son, today I have begotten you. And that he raised him from the dead, no more to return to corruption. He has spoken this, I will give you the sure mercies of David. Therefore, he also said in another psalm, you will not allow your Holy One to see corruption. And he goes on to say this, for David, after he served his own generation by the will of God, fell asleep and was buried and saw corruption. In other words, David died, went into the grave, and then his whole body was corrupted, okay? But look what he says, but he whom God raised up saw no corruption. Jesus rose from the dead. He never ended up in the grave and stayed there. Therefore, let it be known to you, brethren, that though this man preached to you the forgiveness of sins, and by him everyone who believes is justified for all things which you could not be justified by the law of Moses, beware therefore lest what has been spoken in the prophets comes upon you. In other words, the prophets spoke all about what's going to happen if you don't believe in Jesus. And they're like, if you don't believe in him, I can't help you after that. Behold, you despisers, marvel and perish, for I work a work in your days, a work which you by no means believe, though one were to glare it to you. So when the Jews went out of the synagogue, are we at 41, 42? Okay, forget that. All right. I want to stop there for a second, and I want to just say this. Sometimes when I feel like my faith is just like faltering, and I'm just like, I don't know. Is that really true? Do I really believe this? Because everyone goes through those times of doubt in your life. And when I go through that, the one thing that I do is go back and look at prophecy. And I say, you know what? If God has written this book that says 2,000 things are going to happen, and then they actually did hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years in the future to the letter, I'm going to believe that book. because that's a supernatural book. No one can foretell the future like that, but God has told us what's going to happen. And when I go back and look at that, it restores my faith. And that's what Paul is trying to get them to do. Look back in the past and see what this looks like. And they refused to believe. We have over 2,000 prophecies, and we have about 500 more to go about the end times. But he wanted the Jews to connect the dots, and they literally would not do it. They didn't want to hear it. They're set in their ways. I thought this was kind of funny. 3 guys were kind of set in their ways, and they all were really kind of bad, and they got themselves in a bunch of trouble. And they were convicted of 20 years in solitary confinement, each one of them. But they were told when they went into solitary confinement that they could bring one thing with them. And so the first guy, he decided that he wanted to take books. He said, I'm just going to study and take books, and hopefully I can become a lawyer when I get out. The second guy said, I want to take my wife with me for 20 years. I bet that made her really happy. The third guy said, I want to take 200 cartons of cigarettes. Okay, that makes sense. So at the end of the 20 years, they opened up the first cell, and the guy came out and he said, oh my gosh, that was the best 20 years of my life. I learned so much. I'm so smart. I'm going to become a lawyer now. The second guy comes out. They open the door up, and he comes out with his wife, and they've got 5 kids. He said, that was the greatest time of my life. My wife and I have never been so close. I have a new family. That's awesome. The third guy, they open the door, and he starts slapping his pockets, and he says, does anyone have a match? I know. Okay. Anyway, the Jews left because they didn't want to hear. The Gentiles were desperate to hear more. I just want a reminder that sometimes religious people are the hardest people to reach. And you and I know that. Next week, we're going to really talk about what does it mean to be a religious person? Because there's some religious people that have a really hard time understanding what it means to follow Christ. And we'll talk a little bit about that next week. But religious people are very, very set in their ways. No matter what Paul says to these people, it's like they just refuse to believe. And there's nothing more frustrating. I know I tell you this story all the time. But when the Wilders were here, and they came to speak on Mormonism because they were Mormons for 30 years. And anyway, I told you I invited my cousins, and 2 of them came. And I was so shocked that the Wilders really literally walked through the scriptures. This is why Mormonism is not true. I came to the understanding that what the Bible says is not what the Book of Mormon teaches or what the Mormon church teaches. Step by step by step, verse by verse by verse. And they walked away from that night more hard-hearted than they were before they got there. And I was so shocked. I was like, nothing I could say would ever change their mind. And I think that's in a small way what Paul was feeling. Like, what is wrong with these people? Why can't, it's right in front of you. Why can't you see it? Anyway, I think Paul finally got the grip, what I've had to get to, is that nobody can change someone's heart and mind unless God. He's the only one. The good news for Paul is that in verse 43 is that God did change some of the people. Look at verse 42. When the Jews went out from the synagogue, the Gentiles begged these words might be preached to them the next Sabbath. So this is where it goes, the good, bad, good, bad. That's a good thing. The Gentiles come out and they're like, yes, we loved you. Come back and preach to us next week. Verse 43, now when the congregation had broken up, many of the Jews and devout proselytes followed Paul and Barnabas, who speaking to them persuaded them to continue in the grace of God. Now, this is what I want you to know. Some of the Jews did follow Jesus. Some of the Jews actually did end up following Christ. Probably not many of them, but a few of them did. But I love what Paul does. He says what? We persuaded them, what does it say? Broken, blah, 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 blah. Persuaded them to continue in the grace of God. Where did I miss it? I wonder if I have different. I don't know what I said. Anyway, what did I do? Thank you, David. Here's what he did. You're actually listening. Sometimes I wonder if you sometimes I think David probably falls asleep most of the time. I won't tell you that though. See, the lights are so bright, David, so I can't see you back there. So if you do nod off, I don't know that. But thank you. He persuaded them. He encouraged them to continue in the grace of God. That's what it is. Here's what I want you to know. So many people here are very discouraged. You're discouraged just like Paul could have been. You're discouraged because you have an unsaved husband, an unsaved child, and unsaved parents. And every time you see them, just like I think Paul did, you just want to shake some Jesus sense into them. Okay, you just want to grab them and say, what is wrong with you? Why can't you believe this? And you feel discouraged. And I think I put this up before, but here I want to put it up again. I have this in my office hanging up as I walk in. Never give up on anybody or anything, because miracles happen every single day. Paul encouraged them because he knew one thing: they were going to need to be encouraged. They need to be encouraged because all the voices around them were going to say, no, 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 you need to go back to being Jewish. You need to go back. You can't go in the synagogue if you follow Jesus. We need to learn to be the most encouraging people to others. There was a man whose lifelong dream was to sail around the world in his boat. So he set off on a voyage, and there was a crowd of people laughing at him on the pier. They were yelling at him, and they were saying, you're never going to make it. You're going to starve to death. Your boat's never going to withstand any of those storms. Everything the people said was, you're not going to make it. Can I just tell you, we feel discouraged most often in our life because people do that to us. They always complain about something. Your ministry isn't the way I need it to be. Your marriage isn't the way that it should be. The way you're acting isn't the right way. It's constant negative, 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 and you're just a disaster. I want to say, please stop it. People, especially in ministry, they need to be encouraged all the time. There is nothing. I can get 10 emails that say, thank you, Lisa, for what you do, blah, 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 you've changed my life, all this. And one negative one that says, you suck, you dress like a prostitute, and blah, blah, blah. I won't even tell you the rest of the stuff. And you know what? The 10 just go by the wayside. The one devastates me. And it's just like that because I don't need to be discouraged. Ministry is discouraging enough as it is. Marriage is discouraging. You need to encourage people to love their husbands and be there for them and try to do what they can to make their marriage work. We don't need discouraging voices in our life because sometimes we feel like we're the only ones in the boat. We feel like we're the only ones on this long journey. And a lot of times we don't even think we're going to make it ourselves. And that's why we have to be, as Christians and followers of Christ, the most encouraging people. We need someone to come along to us and say, don't listen to those voices that are telling you to stop. Don't do it. I look out every day, and I tell you this, in our new house, to a Mormon church that built right directly that direction. And I'm telling you what, I'm reminded every day of my cousin's eternal future, and it makes me sick. I can't do anything about it. I can't change them. Just like Paul, they wouldn't listen. They don't listen, and it makes me so sad. But you know what? That could paralyze me, and I could wander around being so discouraged because my Mormon cousins won't believe. But you know what? It just makes me pray harder for a miracle, and that's what we have to do. But I need someone to come alongside of me, and Lynn Wilder will do that. She'll be like, Lisa, it's fine. Keep on going. Keep praying for him. There's also another side of this coin for Paul and Barnabas. There are people who are encouragers, and I want to thank those of you that do encourage me all the time and encourage others. In June of 1965, there was another small boat that left Massachusetts, and it was 13 and a half feet long. It would be the smallest boat ever in history to make a trip to England. And the man attempting it had been a dream for most of his life, but he really didn't tell anyone. And he said because he was terrified, not of the ocean, but he was terrified because people would say, stop, don't do it, you can't do it. He was so terrified of the negativity of people and the discouragement from people that he just never told anyone. So he got on the boat, and his wife, Virginia, was the only one that stood behind him. And she was so proud of him all the time, and she kept saying, I know you can do it, I know you can do it, keep on going. He gets in his boat, and it was nothing if like the worst thing in life. He said he spent many nights going without sleep, trying to just not be hit by other boats on the shipping lanes. He said after weeks his food became tasteless. He was lonely. He started having hallucinations. His rudder broke 3 times. The storms toppled his boat that had he not had a security system on him, he would have, fallen over and died. But after 78 days alone at sea, he sailed into England. And during the time, he kept thinking, when I get to England, I'm going to go all by myself. I'm going to go get a hotel room. I'm going to get a nice dinner. And then the next day I'll go to the Associated Press and I'll say, hey, I just made it from Massachusetts to England. Do you want a story? So he sees land, and as he gets closer and closer, to his amazement, 300 boats are there waiting for his arrival. And they're honking their horns, and they're blasting, and they're escorting him into port. And 40,000 people were standing on the side, cheering him on as a homecoming to England. He had become an overnight hero. But the reason why is because standing on that dock was his wife, Virginia. She never criticized. She refused to be negative. And I just want to say, we need to be encouraged. Please, please, if you are about ready to say something discouraging out of your mouth, stop it. All right? The best thing you can do is to pray for that person and not tell them how you feel all the time. If you're upset about something, people need to be encouraged in life. Please understand that. Now, here's the down part of it. Here's the up and down part. Next Sabbath, almost the whole city came to hear the word of God. That would be like, we walk in here and there's 1 million people sitting here. We're like, oh my gosh, what just happened? This is the funnest day ever. 1 million people showed up for Bible study. But then, look what happens. That's an up moment. Here's your down moment. But when the Jews saw the multitudes, they were filled with envy and contradicting and blaspheming. They opposed the things spoken of Paul. Do you see what that means? Up, down, up, down. Jews are mad. Gentiles are happy. Some love me. Some hate me. It's just this life that we live in. Then Paul and Barnabas grew bold and said it was necessary that the word of God should be spoken to you first. But since you reject it and judge yourselves unworthy of everlasting life, behold, we're going to turn to the Gentiles. For so the Lord has commanded us, I have set for you as a light to the Gentiles, that you should be for salvation to the ends of the earth. Here's what he's saying. All right, enough's enough. I'm done with you guys. I'm done with you fighting. I'm done fighting with you. I'm done arguing with you. I'm done everything. I'm just done. And some of you, I hate to say this, you need to get to that place with your unsaved friends and your unsaved family and your unsaved whatever. Here's what I'd say. You need to pray for them. You need to continually pray for them. But you need to move on. And you need to let God work in their hearts. And sometimes God can work better in their hearts without hearing our voice to them. I'm giving you permission to stand back and say, you know what, God, I'm giving this person to you. Because what Paul does, he loves the Jewish people. And he says, God, they're yours. I can't do it anymore. They won't listen to me. And sometimes people become Christians by other people, not because of our family. Rob and I were talking about this the other day. Rob was telling Dusty something, and he told him, we tell him that the same thing all the time. And Dusty calls his brother and said, I'm having a problem with this. Can you help me out? And Micah told him the exact same thing. And he comes running around the corner and he said, guess what Micah just told me? And Rob and I looked at each other like, we've been telling him that over and over. It's just a different voice. So please know it's okay if you stop talking. Now when the Gentiles heard this, they were glad and glorified the word of the Lord, and as many as had been appointed to eternal life believed. The word of the Lord was being spread throughout all that region. And the Jews stirred up devout and prominent women, and the chief men of the city raised up persecution against Paul and Barnabas and expelled them from the region. Now, here's what I want you to know. Do you see the life of Paul? Happy, sad, happy, sad, happy. So how do we live in this world like that? How do we live in these days where some days are good and some days are bad and some days feel encouraged and some days don't? Here's what they did. They shook off the dust from their feet against him and came to Iconium. They shook it off. They moved on. They didn't get depressed. They didn't start drinking. They didn't start popping more pills. They didn't start eating more ice cream. All right? They didn't do any of those things. They shook it off and moved on. So what do we do when life gets encouraging and discouraging for us? Here's what I want you to know. Some days in your life are going to feel really good, and other days are going to feel bad. But I want you to know that if you and I can get this in our brain, I am here to serve God. I'm just here to serve God. That is why I think that Paul and Peter and Barnabas and all these guys just made it, because they're like, you know what? It doesn't matter what anyone thinks. I'm just here to serve God. It doesn't matter. See, they just got kicked out of a city. How would you feel? You're like, well, I got kicked out of my marriage. I got kicked out of my job. I got kicked out of my family. And yet what we see here is it didn't bother them because they had one focus in their life, and that was serving God. And when you and I can get to that point in our life where we're just like, you know what, God, I'm just here to serve you. If my friend doesn't want to be friends with me and my parents think I'm a nutcase, that's okay. It doesn't matter because I'm serving you. Verse 52, and the disciples were filled with joy and with the Holy Spirit. They just got kicked out of town. They just got persecuted, and they were filled with joy. And I'll tell you why. This is the key to this whole Christian life. Here's what it is. Their life stopped being about them. When you and I walk around and we're around people and we're just like, well, you hurt my feelings. That just wasn't nice of you to do that. I just can't get over it. I'm just so offended. Stop it. You're making life about you. The minute we make life about Jesus alone, that's when you and I can walk around with joy and be filled with the Spirit. It's so simple. Stop letting people bug you. It's not worth it. It really isn't. So here's how we end. Never quit. Never, ever, ever quit unless you know absolutely 100% certain the Holy Spirit is moving you. Please do this. Walk out this door today and encourage someone that you think might need some encouragement. And here you go. Be joyful. Be joyful no matter what. And you say, but I can't, Lisa. And I'm like, yes, you can. And you can because the more you make it life about Jesus and less about you, here's the deal. You can do it. You just won't care anymore. And the reason why you won't care is because it's not about you. We care when it's about us. When it becomes about Jesus, you're going to live a life filled with joy, and it's going to be the greatest life of ever. Father, thank you so much for your word. God, I can't imagine what it was like for these early disciples and the pain and rejection of everything that they felt city to city to city and desperately trying to get your message out and people just rejecting them. God, I pray that we will get that today and realize they just cared about you. God, help us to do that. Help us to stop being so inward focused and make us realize it's not about me. It has to be about you. God, each one of us are at different places in our spiritual walk, and I pray desperately that you would help us to make our life and recognize, okay, what is it in me that's making it about me? God, change each one of us to where we can go be encouragers and not discouragers. I pray for each person in here in Jesus' name. Amen.